Howdy there, everybody. It is 30th of April. This is Bevy coming to you from Hamtopia, and we are on chapter 34 of The Reaper and the Scribe. Thank you for joining me today. Alfred Winters was now the head of one of, if not the wealthiest, companies in Great Britain. He had a vast amount of readily available cash at his fingertips with which he could expand his company beyond belief. The money invested into his company had been sitting in the bank for quite some time, working for him without his knowledge, but now he was aware of it. He knew it was time to put his plans into action. He had, of course, attended many meetings with his parents, Stanley and Gertrude, regarding firstly how he had come upon this money and secondly the wisest way to use said money. Alfred's parents were in total agreement with him as to the reinvestment into the company, especially as with the downturn in trade, many haulage companies were struggling. With the full backing of his parents and a gentle push in the right direction from the realm of nature, he forged ahead. The 1970s had been quite a turbulent decade, and not the one envisaged by many, as industrial unrest and countless bad decisions made by the politicians of the day had resulted in 3-day work weeks and mass redundancies being the norm. Power cuts plagued industry as the government at the time busied themselves with the closure of many coal mines, and a great deal of Britain's famous business contracts were handed over to foreign countries to produce the goods that were once provided by Britain itself. As every single industry flailed and floundered during this, one of the worst times in British industry, Winters Logistics continued to expand, just as it had during the Great Depression of 1926. Meanwhile, in a rural part of North Yorkshire, a rather well-to-do family were celebrating. Donald and Harriet Jackson's son Gavin had achieved all the grades he required after completing his A-levels and was packing his bags to move to university. Gavin Jackson was the only child of this extremely wealthy couple. His life was a privileged one from the beginning, as he was attended to as a youngster by both mother and nanny. The family also had a butler and a cook who had been blessed with a daughter by the name of Alice. They employed a chambermaid as well. Unfortunately, they had never been successful at keeping that particular position permanently filled. Alice's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jarvis, however, had been in their employ for many years. Harriet Jackson had tears streaming down her cheeks when her fresh-faced young son threw his bag containing his clothes, his records, and, strapped to the side of it, his cricket bat and pads, into the boot of his friend Hugo Thornton Ellis's Mini Cooper. He threw his arms around her and said, "Thanks for everything, Mother. I couldn't have done this without you," as he kissed her on both cheeks and then outstretched his hand to his father, who slipped an envelope containing £300 into his son's palm. If you really want to become a pathologist, here is where all the hard work begins. But remember this, play as hard as you work. That will bring balance, and maybe one day you will swing that willow for Yorkshire." "Thank you, Father. I will give it my best shot to study and play, and one day I will make you proud," said Gavin, shaking his father's hand. He turned and ran to the car. As it drove off, he leaned out of the window and shouted, "See you in 12 weeks!" Donald Eugene Jackson put his arm around Harriet and said, "Chin up, old girl. We knew this day was coming. We also know he will make us proud. Now, what say you to a brandy?" Back in Leeds, Police Constable Jack Thompson was celebrating his 35th birthday. But a happy day it was not, as he'd been called into Police HQ that morning to give his report on the murderer he chased up the alley between the butchers and the accountants the previous day. As expected, the meeting did not go well, as the PC's rendition of the events of the day were not believed by his superior officers, and he was asked to strike his notes from the records. This was a stunning blow to take. He had indeed witnessed a man being ripped in two by the assailant he was chasing, and no matter how many people told him otherwise, he knew what he saw and decided to open a file of his own and keep it secret. When he returned to his own station, the desk sergeant handed him a birthday card and said, "I don't know what was said there, and I don't want to. What has transpired at HQ is between you and them. What I will say is you are an honest copper, and I believe you. Now, as it's your birthday, this is kind of a present. Let me introduce you to my newest recruit. As you are the senior PC at this Nick, I would like you to show him around. He has come here fresh from cadet school, and this is his first day on the job, so let me introduce you to PC Glenn Simpson." "Cheers, Sarge. This makes my day immeasurably better." "You'd better come with me, lad. I'll show you around the place where nothing ever happens," said a jaded PC Jack Thompson, whose day was getting worse by the second. The two police constables walked in silence up Park Road until they came to a cafe. Once inside, Jack Thompson bought his new acquaintance, Glenn Simpson, a cup of tea. The two men strolled over to a table by the window and joined the man who was already sitting there. "Hello, Sid," said Jack. "We appear to have a new plod," observed Sid Jenkins, a journalist with a local newspaper. "Yep, this is his first day on the job. Let me introduce you to PC Glenn Simpson. This is my friend, Sidney Jenkins." The two men shook hands as the newsman asked, "Anything new on the killings?" "Now, you know better than to ask me that, today of all days," answered Jack Thompson wearily. "I take it your meeting didn't go well?" "You could say that," quipped Jack. The conversation carried on over the next half hour. Then the three men parted, two of them carrying on up Park Road, and the other making his way back to the newspaper building. As the two friends parted, Sid Jenkins grasped Jack Thompson's arm and quietly whispered in his ear, "I saw it happen, Jack. I was at the other end of the alley, working on a different story. Ditch the kid, and we can speak without prying ears. Jack told Sid he would meet him after his shift ended. A little further up the road, the new recruit remarked, "Is it prudent to have a friend who works for the newspaper? You will find that many things are different in everyday police work than what you learned at the academy. You must find as many ways to gather information as you can. This is why some CID officers have a certain relationship with petty criminals. It is a way of keeping your ear to the ground and your finger on the pulse, as it were. I take it you mean this to be a career, lad?" ventured Jack. "Indeed I do," answered the young PC with pride. "Then take heed of my words. The potential is there to go as high as you wish to within the police force." "I heard talk this morning that you're not going to be a PC for much longer," broached Glenn. "Yes, I'm joining CID next week, so I will be Detective Constable Jack Thompson." "Congratulations!" enthused the new PC. Jack Thompson laughed hollowly and said, "That might change after this morning's meeting at HQ." "How so?" asked Glenn. "Yeah, never mind. I was only joking," answered Jack with a wry smile. All through that shift, all Jack could think of was rejoining his friend to learn just what he had witnessed. After what seemed the longest day ever, it was finally time to get out of his uniform and head off to the pub to meet up with the reporter. After a short stroll, Jack entered the Peel public house and saw his friend Sid sitting at one of the tables. He purchased 2 pints of lager at the bar, then joined the reporter. As soon as he'd placed the beer on the table and sat down, he exhaled heavily. "Oh, that was a long day. Now, tell me what you saw." "Off the record, for now, I witnessed the guy that you were chasing rip that unfortunate man into 2 separate pieces with my own eyes. I watched him do it with his bare hands." "Did you see his face?" asked Thompson excitedly. "That's the reason why this is off the record at the moment." "Yes, I saw his face, but it was fleeting. I cannot be 100% sure because I was working with that idiot Don Steele, who got in the way the very moment when he looked towards me. But between you and me, Jack, I could have sworn it was Atkinson." "The accountant?" "Yes. I am working this story on my own because the newspaper doesn't want anything to do with it. When I told my editor what I had seen, he simply laughed and ordered me to get on with some real work. The question is, Jack, who are we dealing with here?" "The question is, Sid, what are we dealing with here?" The 2 friends were left pondering upon where to go next. The policeman had been ridiculed at his HQ, and the journalist had suffered the same fate at the hands of his editor. Over another pint of beer, they both agreed to try and get to the bottom of this latest murder, and all the others that had taken place during the time both of them had been doing their jobs. It had, in fact, been the worst run of murders that that town had ever known. Apart from Dr. Grayson's inconclusive reports on the deceased individuals, no other evidence had been collected about the case, and nothing was known about this strange man known as Atkinson, or his equally strange company, Atkinson and Dewhurst. Police Constable Jack Thompson decided he would find a way of visiting the accounting firm the following day. As Tuesday dawned, dull and wet, Jack Thompson was already at his locker, getting changed for the day's business. He had been informed that his new underling was on his day off, so he would be on his own most of the day, and that day was going to begin with a visit to the accountants. After the morning briefing, he was the first out of the door, making a beeline for Atkinson and Dewhurst. Upon arriving, he was met by an elderly gentleman. "May I be of assistance, Constable? I was wondering if I might see your Mr. Atkinson. It is with deepest regret that I must inform you that Mr. Atkinson died last night. It was rather sudden and has been a shock to us all. Perhaps Mr. Dewhurst could help, as he is the man who is in charge now," answered Mr. Braithwaite. "Oh, I see. No, there's no need to call Mr. Dewhurst. It wasn't anything important," said the dejected police constable. A little way down the road from the old Tudor building was a phone box, and Jack Thompson made his way towards it. Its wet and slightly steamy windows seemed to emphasize the dull, overcast day. Jack lifted the receiver and rang his friend, Sidney. At the sound of the rapid pip noise, he pushed his 2-pence piece into the slot and asked for Sid Jenkins. After a brief time, Sid answered the phone. "Sid, can you talk, or is anybody with you?" "Don Steele is in the room, but he wouldn't know a story if it hit him on the head, so don't worry about him. How did you get on this morning?" "A dead end, I'm afraid. And I do mean dead. I was informed that the man I chased died last night and has been replaced by someone called Dewhurst." "That sounds a bit too coincidental. So here we are, back to square one again. It's a good job I didn't go with the story, because we would have an egg on our face now." "Yeah, indeed. Maybe I'll see you in the cafe later?" "Yeah, I'll be there about 1 o'clock. I've managed to ditch the idiot today, as the editor has given him a different job. Will you have your underling?" "Nope, this is his day off, so it will be just us two. Maybe we can work out where to go from here, but from my side it looks like case closed. If it was him, the murders will stop, but it all sounds very strange to me, and as I've said, a little too convenient, but that's just the skeptical newsman that I am," quipped Sid. Jack lowered his head along with his words and said in a gruff whisper, "Something tells me this'll come back to haunt us one day, Sid. Mark my words." Time wore on, and indeed the murders did stop. A time of peace and tranquility reigned, with very little news for the reporters and humdrum work for the newly promoted Detective Inspector Jack Thompson. At another police station, a batch of fresh-faced police cadets became full police constables. PC Paul Johnson and WPC Linda Harper were amongst them as they began their police careers properly on the brink of the 1980s. Both were posted at Park Road Police Station, but worked different shifts, so all they saw of one another was a passing moment during shift change. WPC Harper was slightly introverted and just kept herself to herself. There seemed to be an air of secrecy about her. PC Johnson was the opposite. He was gregarious and outgoing, with his eye on a career as a detective. He quickly became friends with the newly appointed Detective Inspector Thompson. Well, as friendly as you could be with Jack, as he kept his cards very close to his chest and let very few people share his private thoughts. In that very town in northern England, where all this was taking place, there was a new music scene, as goth culture had firmly landed and was being enjoyed in many clubs, such as the Phono in the Marion Center. This was a music movement that didn't cause the police any problems, unlike the mods and rockers of previous years. Local bands, such as the Sisters of Mercy, played to packed-out pubs and clubs, mainly to students, two of which were university boys, Freddie Chambers and Jamie Winters, who were under to be drinking, but looked like 18-year-olds. They always sat near the back, discussing the only two subjects they ever talked about: engineering and touring the world. Although both young men were from completely diverse backgrounds, they had so much in common. Neither of them seemed interested in girls, even though they were both straight in sexual orientation. Both were complete nerds in their chosen subjects, and both loved old steam engines. It was on one such night when they formulated a plan to first backpack around the world and then restore a steam engine. Freddie thought of it as pie in the sky because of the massive cost of restoration, but he was completely unaware that Jamie was the son of one of the richest families in Britain. This was a piece of information that Jamie kept to himself, so he could make real friends, not people only attracted to his money. Jamie decided to leave the phono early that particular evening, as he had a paper to finish on the Industrial Revolution that needed to be handed in the following day. On his way out, he passed what he thought were two young lovers, and he smiled and said hello. Both people said hello back as they made their way down the stairs. The couple in question were, in fact, brother and sister. The older male sibling was celebrating the Ph.D. he had just attained, and the slightly younger one was celebrating becoming a police officer. Tom and Linda Harper entered the club just as the DJ began to play a Susie and the Banshees record. Within a different realm of existence, the one where Mother Nature resides, the goddess smiled serenely as all seemed to be moving in the right direction. The Reaper system was back in the hands of Dewhurst, meaning a less torrid time for the rest of the century, and she could concentrate on the plans she had for the new millennium. Within the other realm, the Alpha bade his son back for an audience to see if his imposed solitary confinement had paid any dividends. Atkinson Sr. was a foreboding manifestation of his former self. He had long since ceased reaping due to his hatred of the human race, now keeping himself within the confines of his domain. Father, I ask, why do you bring me back early? Why? Hold your tongue, boy! He pointed a twisted, accusing finger. You were almost caught by those meddling humans. They would never have caught. I said, hold your tongue! The infuriated god of death interrupted his son, head shaking and spittle flying. Why do you indiscriminately kill humans that are not on your list? And why do you do it on the plane of existence? Demanded Atkinson Sr. I hate these insignificant humans as much as you do, Father. I would see an end to them all, whether in the realm of death or the plane of existence. I don't care where I kill them. I just love to get rid of as many as I can. Hissed the father, his rage receding. I know this hatred. If it wasn't for that weak-minded Dewhurst, they would be long gone, like all the creatures I tired of before them. But know you this, boy, reaping will be performed in the realm of death. Do I make myself clear, or do I remove your reaper status? Clear as day, Father. I tire of you! Now go, whilst the blood still runs in your veins and you can still draw breath, growled Atkinson Sr. Atkinson Jr. retired to his designated part of the other realm, a place that was his and his alone, a place where he could mull over a plan he had wanted to execute since the Middle Ages. His thoughts turned to the approaching millennium. It was now 1986, and Winters Logistics was by far the largest privately owned company in Europe, possibly the world. Everything was working to the original plan that Mother Nature designed herself. Alfred Winters had proven to be everything his ancestors had been. He was a fair and tolerant boss, his workforce only changing due to retirees, and there were never any industrial problems. 16-year-old Alice was still loved by everyone, as she was as a child. Her sunny disposition brought a smile to everyone's face she knew, and she made it her mission to know everyone who worked in her father's head office and local distribution center. Alice's mother, Amanda, now had a full HGV driving license and often filled in for a driver who couldn't make it into work. This was the year that both Jamie and Freddie began university. They had cemented their plans and would work very hard to gain the qualifications they needed so they could become engineers. Once they were finished with university, they would take a year out and backpack around the world, just as everything was going so well for the Winters family. 1986 also saw tragedy. as Gertrude Winters summoned her family to her husband's sick bed. Alfred and Amanda had been expecting this call, and as both Jamie and Alice were home for summer break, they all made the short journey to their stricken relative's bed. As they arrived, the doctor was just leaving the house. They were met by Gertrude at the door, and she led Alfred, Jamie, and Alicia up the stairs to be at her husband's side. Stopping her with a gentle hand, she asked Amanda to stay. "Amanda, I've been holding on to something for many years, and I think now is the time." Pulling the ring from her finger, she gave it to Amanda, her face somber. "Please, take this ring, Amanda. It has been passed down our family through every female member. It was initially given to our ancestor Alice Watson by a woman who told her an angel gave it to her. Maybe this story has become a bit stranger as each person has told it, but I now want to pass it on to you. Stanley will die today, and I don't know how long I will have after him, so I want to do this now. Will you give this ring to Alice and tell her the story? It is the most important thing you will ever do. You must give her this on her 18th birthday. Do I have your word that you will do this?" As Amanda agreed that she would comply, they both heard Stanley call out for Gertrude. Amanda helped Gertrude hurry up the stairs and into the room where Stanley lay, waiting. "He's here for me, Gertrude. I have to go now," croaked a very weak Stanley. "Who is here, my dear?" asked a puzzled Gertrude. "There is no need to answer that question, Stanley Winters. Take my hand and walk with me." The room around him grew dim, and only muffled sounds of crying could be heard. "Where do you take me?" Stanley asked with childlike curiosity. "To a place where your kind can start anew, living in peace and reunited with your family, then on to a new beginning." Stanley smiled, and the dark figure walked towards light, leaving the darkness behind. The funeral of Stanley Winters proceeded in much the same fashion as all the Winters clan had since the departing of Albert Winters in 1868. The streets were lined with people watching on as the funeral procession passed slowly by, and the same uncertainty as to why the people were there running through the minds of the gathered masses, as well as the bereaved family. The reason lay in a different realm, as the goddess of nature watched on as her chosen family to benchmark her decision whether to fully cull the human race or save a selective few became one less. Mother Nature knew she would allow one more family member to be laid to rest before her plan would be set in motion as the time was almost upon them. The marker ring was firmly upon the finger of her chosen one, the one whom she had sent back in time, which was now living her alternate future, a future untainted by wealth or prosperity. Alice had become a wonderful young woman who showed compassion for anyone less fortunate than her, a woman who was a joy to be around, and one who would soon possess the amassed fortune that the hard work of her ancestors had endowed her with. This fortune would soon be put to good use by the turn of the century. The following 4 years heralded the end of Jamie's and Freddie's studies, and the revelation that Freddie had befriended one of the richest ex-students in the world, a fact that at first took some getting over, but he totally understood why Jamie had hidden this knowledge from him. Happily, this meant the backpacking trip was now a reality, and an entire year of sightseeing and fun, mixed with fruit picking for work experience too, now lay ahead of them. Alice's 18th birthday came and went with the passing of a ring and a story. When the story was told this time, however, it was totally believed, because Alice knew the angel that had given the ring to that old woman on a canal bank back in 1849 was, no matter how strange it might seem, her. The year was 1992, and the month was May. Celebrations were being held outside the town hall as Leeds United, the local football team, had been crowned the First Division champions. The Winters family, however, were not in a jovial mood. Once again, they had been called to the home of Gertrude Winters. Gertrude had had a live-in nurse with her since her husband Stanley had died some 6 years earlier, but had suffered a stroke 18 months prior and never fully recovered. All of her beloved family was gathered round her bedside as she drifted in and out of consciousness. "Just wait 1 minute, please," pleaded a frail Gertrude. To nobody, it seemed, her eyes locked onto an invisible figure. "I need to talk to Alice," she explained to the vacuous space. "I'm here, Gran," answered the sweet voice of her granddaughter. "Come close, child," Gertrude said in a tremulous voice. Alice placed her ear to her grandmother's mouth, her own mouth falling open as she listened to her words. "I take my leave of this plane of existence by Mr. Dewhurst's side. This is your time now. Sometime in the future, a man and a woman will call upon you. You must do exactly as they say and act upon their every word. The whole of humanity is depending upon you and your actions. Go now in peace and have a time of fun, because dark and sinister clouds are gathering, and you will be called upon to save them." The powerful voice of Mother Nature morphed back into her grandmother's last 3 words. I love you. Gertrude Winters took the hand of Dewhurst and arose from her dead body. Awaiting her with their arms outstretched was her entire family, right back to Albert and Doris, which she ran to like a child. Dewhurst walked away with them as they all prepared to be born again into a better world in the not-too-distant future. Left behind was the family that would make all this possible: Alfred, Amanda, Jamie, and Alice Winters. For now, the Winters family would enjoy the rest of the century in relative peace and happiness until future happenings would bring them back to the fore.